Please welcome back the president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, Dr. Kyle Yasuda.
This is so exciting today, y'all. You know, when I came to New Orleans, I had a couple things on my punch list. Number one, I get to meet a justice of the Supreme Court, which has never happened to me before. I actually had three things on my punch list. The second thing on my punch list is going to the Gulf and go fishing. Sorry, folks. And the third thing, which should be number one, I get to introduce a member of Congress, which I've never done before. Not only is she a member of Congress, she's a pediatrician. Not only she's a pediatrician, she's a member of the Academy of Pediatrics. Not only she's a member of pediatrics, she's the only female pediatrician ever in Congress. It's an absolute honor to introduce Dr. Kimberly Schrier, or Kim Schrier, from the great state of Washington. She serves on I got to read something because I don't want to mess this up. She serves on the House Committee of Education and Labor, the House Committee of Agriculture, and she's a critical voice for kids and families in Congress. It is an absolute pleasure to have Dr. Representative Kim Schrier in the House of Representatives as we visit the Hill. She's one of us. She's got the heart of a primary care pediatrician, which is just wonderful. And so without further ado, Dr. Kim Schrier.
Wow, thank you. Kyle, first of all, thank you for that incredibly warm introduction. I am so delighted to be here. I'm super excited to be here. And I have to tell you that when Kyle and the American Academy of Pediatrics invited me to be a keynote speaker, it was just such an honor. I also got incredibly nervous, but I'm feeling now like I am with family. So thank you. So I also want to tell you that the first meeting that I ever had after being sworn in as a member of Congress was with the American Academy of Pediatrics, and it is still, hands down, my favorite meeting ever. I mean, lobbyists will come in and will give me their spiel, but when the American Academy of Pediatrics comes in, we have exactly the same goals. We agree on every point, and it is such an honor to have this partnership with the AAP. Let me first say that it is the honor of my lifetime to represent Washington's 8th District. And there are 750,000 people in my district, and this district stretches, in case you're curious, from the suburbs of Seattle over across the mountains into apple and cherry country, and then down south and includes Mount Rainier. It is an incredibly beautiful and varied and incredibly purple district. Now, as pediatricians, we work with families from all different backgrounds and hear all different stories, but always the focus is on the child and the family. Now, in this new role, I have had the privilege to meet with so many people who I would otherwise never cross paths with, like orchardists and hay farmers and fish biologists and hydroelectric engineers. And we pediatricians were pretty good listeners. And so in this role, I'm able to put myself in their shoes and imagine things from so many different perspectives. And frankly, that is the only way to represent 750,000 people in this incredibly diverse and purple district. So I've gotten a lot of questions already, and I suppose most of you are curious about what in the world would inspire a pediatrician happy in her suburban practice to just up and run for Congress. So why don't we just start there? It is by far the boldest thing I have ever done, the biggest risk I have ever taken, and it is proving to be incredibly challenging, but also incredibly fulfilling. I didn't just wake up one day and decide to run. In fact, the idea never would have crossed my mind. They say that women need to be asked 7 times to run for Congress. Men, they just wake up and they think, hey, I'm going to run for Congress, and they consider themselves eminently qualified. No offense to the men out there, and I know there are a few. We're just different. So here's the backstory. It really all started with the 2016 election. I was in San Francisco at the AAP conference in October of 2016, and there was this buzz in the air, and there were stickers and pins that said, vote for kids, and there was this assumption in the air that we would have an advocate for children in the White House, somebody who would take the blueprint and totally run with it. There was this tremendous optimism in the air. And then the election happened. And like so many people, I was devastated. And I worried about the direction that our country might be headed under a Trump administration. In particular, I worried about what the fallout would be for children, including my 8-year-old son, Sam. So this became a really personal matter because our children were watching all along the way, and they were watching name calling and bigotry and a loss of civility. And I think we all feared how this would translate to the schoolyard. And we've seen this kind of scapegoating before, and it can infect a society, and it has never led to anything good. In fact, sometimes to horrifying outcomes. I was absolutely bewildered by the total disregard for science as a person of science, and in this setting of climate change, which is such a pressing threat. But politicians too stuck in their party rhetoric to act or even acknowledge the problem, and what an injustice that is to our children. And I don't know if any of you remember, but those 13 men sitting around the table making decisions about women's reproductive health care, and an administration just hell-bent on defunding Planned Parenthood, well, what would that mean for all of our teenage patients? Not to mention all the misogyny and the rhetoric and the objectification of women, and how that would affect the psyche of our girls and also our boy patients. And I worried about public education and our middle class and the widening gap between the haves and the have-nots. And of course, there was one more thing that motivated me and had a lot to do, I think, with the reason that I won, which was that as a pediatrician with type 1 diabetes, there's kind of a theme between Justice Sotomayor and myself. I worried about this steady drumbeat to repeal the Affordable Care Act and what that would mean for our patients and people all across this country with pre-existing conditions who finally had health insurance thanks to the ACA. So still a very normal person. I did what a lot of people did. I marched in the Women's March. Anybody else? Yeah. I called and emailed my congressman, and I joined the resistance. I even coordinated call schedules with my partner, Dr. Rebecca Partridge, so that she could go to the Science March and I could go to the Climate March. Well, I was seeing patients one busy afternoon in clinic, and my oldest friend since age 2, texted me, and she said, I think you should run for Congress. And I replied with something along the lines of, that's really funny, I think you sent this to the wrong person. So I went to see my next patient, and when I returned, I found another text. No, I didn't. You live in a flippable district. You are a pediatrician with type 1 diabetes. People are worried about healthcare. Just don't put it out of your mind so quickly. Think about it. I think I quipped something about Ben Carson and his qualifications to run for president. and that at least I could stay awake. And then I went and saw my next patient. And when I came back, she texted the line that really got me. It was it grabbed me right in my soul. She said, seriously, if not you, who? And if not now, when? So we agreed to talk later. I should note that along the way, even before Tracy mentioned it, my husband had mentioned it, my parents had mentioned it, but I really think they were seriously just joking. So right around that time, the ACA was under full attack by the president and his party. Repeal and replace was the mantra of the day. And the problem was that there was no better replacement offered. And just as a reminder of what that would have done, the AHCA, it would have increased prices for people over 50, the age tax. It would have undermined protections for people with pre-existing conditions, would have defunded Planned Parenthood, and would have eliminated the Medicaid expansion. So I went with 3 other doctors to my congressman's office, and we explained in the most rational way why this would be terrible for our patients and for people all over the 8th district. And 3 days later, he voted to repeal. And all those conversations with Tracy and my husband, they came back into my head. And I thought, you know, I'm ticked off, and maybe they're right, that the diabetic pediatrician might be exactly the right person to run against the ex-sheriff and flip a district. And by the way, he had been in for 7 terms, and I was not even aware at the time that a Democrat had never, ever represented this district. Frank. I hope that's not applause that a Democrat had never. No, seriously, I was not really aware of much of anything about running for office. Like, politics were to me what football is to the country, right? It was a spectator sport. I was super interested. I talked about it all the time, but could never in a million years envision myself in this role. I had been to DC once to visit family and had never met a member of Congress until that day when I met my representative. So the notion that if I took this on, I would have to debate a 7-term incumbent on television inspired sheer panic. So for guidance, I reached out to Emily's List, which by the way is amazing, and the Democratic Party, and was hit with a huge dose of reality. 1, my chances of beating a 7-term incumbent member of Congress were extraordinarily slim. Number 2, I would have to take a year off from work just to run for office. And 3, healthcare, young lady, might not even be the issue by the time of the election, and could I really handle an election based on foreign policy or economics? Emily's List, by the way, that's not who said it. But as far as I was concerned, these were really desperate times. And so I sat down with my husband, and we thought about the state of our country and the dangers posed by an unchecked Trump administration. And we thought about our responsibility to the next generation. We even talked about parallels between this moment in history and other really pivotal times, like the civil rights movement, for example. And we thought about our son and knew that in 10 years, remember he was 8 at the time, in 10 years he would ask, what did you do when Trump got elected? We looked at our finances and had to figure out whether we could go for a year without an income and live off our retirement savings. And then we talked with our 8-year-old and convinced him that it was a really good idea. And then, crazy as it is, we just decided to go for it. I knew nothing about the life of a member of Congress or about what a campaign would entail, but I knew that if I didn't step up and we didn't flip this seat and we didn't flip this house, that I would never forgive myself for not at least trying. And I wanted to be a role model for Sam, that when something is wrong in this world, you stand up and you do something about it. And then together, we took the plunge and embarked on a difficult but incredibly inspiring 15-month campaign. 4,000 volunteers supported me, so I did not take this on alone. And people all across the country joined in the effort. And women, so many women all across the country made this same calculation at exactly the same time. We didn't know each other, we're doing this, and we became a pink wave. Now, my race was considered a bellwether race. We had to flip 23 seats, and I was number 23. So if Schrier could flip the 8th, we'd flip the House. And if she couldn't, well then, oh well. And that's a bit of weight to carry on your shoulders. So I was really grateful for those 4,000 people who were there, their hands on my back, supporting me, helping me along the way. And one of my mentors, congressman in Washington State, told me at one point that win or lose, I would like myself better for having run. And he was right, that we grow a lot when we challenge ourselves and take a risk and put ourselves out there. And it was challenging, but it was also so much fun. We put together a great team and I met wonderful people. And once in my 7,000 square mile district where there's only one way to get over the mountains, one pass called Snoqualmie Pass, and they close it all the time. We got stuck 100 miles away from home because they had closed a snowy pass to traffic. And that was the night we were holed up in this little restaurant in the middle of nowhere, and we heard the song Girl on Fire by Alicia Keys. And then we jokingly changed the lyrics to, "This girl is Kim Schrier." And a campaign song was born. So we referred to the momentum that this campaign generated, and it was insane momentum, as Schrier Fire. It became our motto, and then it was the theme on election night. And then this year, this was another first, I played on the women's congressional softball team. And let me just tell you about first, I had never played softball before. So David and Sam, Dave is my husband, and Sam, they had to teach me the rules. And every weekend I would come home and I'd bring my mitt and we would practice throwing so I wouldn't throw like a girl. Sorry, everybody. And we'd practice batting. And then I won, this is just an aside, and then I won most improved player. And I got to, because we pediatricians, we know how to work hard, right? So if I was going to be up there in front of all these people playing softball, well, heck yes, I was going to study on my weekends. And I got to play with Donna Shalala. So let me just tell you, it was a joy. Anyway, I learned to speak in public, and I learned how to debate, and I did face my opponent on television. I spoke from the heart, and it worked. So now I'm the first pediatrician ever elected to Congress and the only woman doctor in Congress. And I have finally shaken what I learned was the imposter syndrome that plagued me throughout the campaign, because it is now abundantly clear that children need a pediatrician in Congress and that we all need a woman doctor there. And kids don't get to vote, but they are subject to every decision that we make, and I am so honored to go to bat for them every day. So together with the AAP, here are some of the battles we're fighting. I've introduced the vaccines bill because we absolutely must combat the spread of online misinformation that is scaring parents and leaving our children unprotected. And who knew, right? As the first pediatrician was sworn into Congress, that we'd have outbreaks all across the country of measles. So I drew on 20 years of working with anxious parents, because we pediatricians know how to meet parents where they are and then win over hearts and minds and get those kids immunized. And my bill does just that. I want you to imagine for a moment the power of a Facebook video, up close, slightly watery eyes with, say, an 80-year-old doctor talking about the child who died in his arms from measles, or talking about his friend who had polio. And our message has to be as compelling as the scare tactics that the anti-vaxxers use. It is time for us to take back that narrative. I get to work to end child hunger and to expand early childhood education, because we all know how important those are, and to keep our children safe from gun violence. We were able to pass the first major piece of gun safety legislation in a generation, universal background checks. And I think the next needs to be child access prevention, because it should not be easier for a child to access a gun than it is for my child to get into my iPhone. And frankly, we just need to have a discussion as a country about whether military-style weapons belong anywhere in our neighborhoods. And by the way, I mentioned that I live in a purple district. That means a hunting, fishing, gun-owning district. And I ran ads on TV about gun safety, and I still got elected, and I think that's a really important message. I also get to play a really important role and have a seat at the table as we work towards universal, affordable health care, and we take on the cost of prescription drugs, because our patients should not have to drive to Canada for EpiPens and insulin. And we finally have a woman doctor in Congress to fight to make sure that women make their own healthcare decisions. So I stand with women. And I stand with Planned Parenthood, and I stand with all of our teen patients who should have easy, low-cost access to birth control, because politicians have no place between doctors and patients. And of course, all of our hearts are breaking for the children at our southern border. Dr. Marcia Griffin spoke about this at the 2016 AAP conference, and since then, of course, things have only worsened. I visited the border at McAllen, Texas, and met with Dr. Griffin and saw children in overcrowded cages on cement floors, some separated from their families, and it is absolutely heartbreaking. However you might feel about immigration, we can all agree that this is no way to treat children, and it just isn't hard to do the right thing. Keep families together. Shorten the amount of time that families spend in CBP custody, and remember that we are a nation of immigrants and that people are people. So these are some of the ways I've already been able to use my voice, the voice of a pediatrician in Congress. Now, sometimes people ask me whether I miss practicing medicine, and sometimes I do. But I've also kind of become the de facto pediatrician for the US House of Representatives. So in addition to all the jokes that you might make about teaching people to play in the sandbox nicely and not throw trucks at one another, and that you can't always get your way, I also get to answer my colleagues' questions. I look at rashes on iPhones. I find out about fevers and how long they've had fevers and what to do next. I give sleep advice. I even got to play doctor in the House chamber. So Justice Sotomayor was there, and I don't know if she heard the thump, but we doctors know the thump that people make when they faint. And so, while our president delivered the State of the Union address, I sprang into action in my white suit, and I had a red stethoscope in my pocket just for flair, kind of a... I found that a colleague had fainted on the other side of the aisle. And when I arrived, he was trying to stand up. He was super embarrassed. So I, of course, pediatrician, said, you know what, you should lie down and put your feet up. And of course, he would not. So I followed him into the Republican cloakroom, which, by the way, smells like cigars. It's super gross. So he sits down in a chair, and I repeated, I said, look, I'm a pediatrician. You really should just lie down on the floor and put your feet up on the chair. And so he kind of slumped down until a male doctor came over, told him to lie on the floor and put his feet up on the chair, and then he did. So go figure. You know. So another thing that people ask me is, well, what is a day like as a member of Congress? And it's like residency, except not in Dansko's. So there's tons of walking. I think I put on about 5 miles a day just in the halls of Congress, running from building to building. And we typically have 3 meetings scheduled all at the same time in different buildings, and it's a little bit insane. And then at night, I go home and I study pretty much until I fall asleep and then get up the next day. And I am so fortunate, and Erin is here with me today, my chief of staff, to have a fantastic team that helps me all along the way. So the other thing that people ask me is, what is it like to be part of this freshman class? We've gotten a bit of fame. And let me just say that it is such an honor to be part of this particular class. I mean, we are a huge, transformative, diverse class with so many women. And I am surrounded by the most magnificent people who are so smart, environmental scientists and marine biologists and prosecutors and CIA agents and veterans, and they all are such good people who did the same thing I did. They just stepped up because they wanted to do the right thing and save our country. And it is a joy to work with every one of them, and such an honor to now call them friends. And I have to tell you that I hope every one of us comes back in 2021. So before I close, I wanted to circle back to Pediatrician Kim, because there was something really remarkable that happened during the campaign, and it continues to this day. I figured that if I lost, half my patients would probably leave me because of political reasons. But something really special happened when I decided to step out of my safe, comfortable life and take on this insane challenge. My patients noticed. The girls especially noticed, and they got excited, and their parents decided to turn this into a big giant civics lesson. And they came to forums and debates, and they showed up and volunteered, and they doorbelled for me. I mean, can you imagine answering your door and somebody says, "Hi, I'm Hannah. My pediatrician's running for Congress, and I think you should vote for her." And then, you know what else happened? Several of my patients went and got involved in student government. And some went off to college and decided to double major in political science. And one learned so much from the campaign that she, as a freshman at UC San Diego, decided she would run for student body president, and she won. So you never really know how the decisions you make might change another person's life, or a child's life, or a country's future. or our planet's health. And it turns out that this country really does need a pediatrician in Congress, at least one. So thank you for everything you do every day to make this a better country for our children and our families. And thank you so much for this opportunity and honor. It feels so great to be with friends, and I am thrilled to join forces with my friends at the American Academy of Pediatrics. Just imagine what we will accomplish together. Thank you.